Welcome to Compliance Chronicles, where we learn from professionals shaping the world of compliance. I'm your host, Liisa Thomas, outside privacy and compliance counsel, an adjunct professor at Northwestern Law School, and a lifelong learner of organizational change. From personal journeys to hard-earned lessons, these are the chronicles that inspire and guide. So we're back with another conversation with a leader in this space, and I am delighted to introduce and welcome you, Lauren, and I'm going to turn it over to you to say what you do right now.
My name is Lauren Ervin, and I am Associate General Counsel for Compass International Holdings.
So Lauren, how did you get into the spot that you are in right now?
I had an interesting trajectory. So I actually was in the financial services area for over 10 years. I started at a small litigation firm in Miami. I did some work for a really large bank, and I segued that to go in-house to a top non-bank mortgage servicer. I worked there for about 9.5 years, and I had a boss, maybe year 5 or 6, who did privacy law. And she said, Lauren, I think privacy is going to be a big deal one day. No one believes me, but I hope you do. And I did believe her. And she and I are still friends today. She decided to leave the company. So she said, if I were you, I would take on privacy. At the time, I was doing basic, more general compliance. The way she explained it to me, it was still falling in that compliance bucket, but was something that I can segue and focus more on privacy. So when she left, my new boss said, who wants privacy? And I quickly but tentatively raised my hand. Was one of those did someone in the back say something? And I said, yeah, I'll take privacy law. And I did it for about 4 years for them. I've been here now about 4 years, and I support our privacy, security, and data governance section for legal.
So this leads us into the next topic, which is some of the challenges that you've faced. So walk us through some of those challenges.
Number one, I often say some people consider privacy to be more like the art class. They know it maybe it's more of a left or right brain. I get people understand it, but they also feel it can be deprioritized sometimes. So I feel like my job is to kind of figure out how to convince people that it's a little bit more than art, right? A little bit more than band, but also band is important. Like I play clarinet. I think band is important. I think art is important to kind of make you a more multifaceted individual. So I feel like for a company, it's just kind of the same kind of segue, which is I know that this company has to do X, Y, and Z. But I also encourage you to think that the people who go to this company, they care about their privacy. They care about their own choices. So it has to be important as well. So let's bake it in and make it more of a value proposition as opposed to something that you hate to do. So what I always try to do, which is difficult sometimes, is to figure out how whatever I'm asking them to do actually can help the business as well. So I don't just try to focus on, here's what you need to do. Sometimes that would be difficult because no one likes to be told this has to be done for these reasons, because it goes against the business's mindset of growth or opportunity or technological development. So the hardest part of my role is really figuring out how I can transition from this A is the right thing to do and it's a regulatory mandate of some sort to, but here's also why numerically this makes sense for our company. The other thing I would say would be just overall privacy framework. I think it's very difficult to keep up with all the different privacy laws. Honestly, there's so many different ones, and you want to make sure that you're doing right by different residents of different states or different regions. So I would say that the hardest part is figuring out am I doing right by the residents? Am I doing right by the company that I'm employed with? And that takes a lot of EQ as well as some IQ. I think the biggest challenge in trying to convince the business that I'm not making up rules, that privacy truly is that evolving of a landscape, I think is just difficult to do.
Let's switch to things that you have learned, lessons to navigate through the complex set of laws, the ever-changing landscape, new laws, and trying to work with the business to get them to make changes. What are some of the things that you've learned along the way?
I've been in-house for 2 different organizations, and thing that I've learned is you have to really learn the business first. You have to understand, just it's like almost like a mediation, that if I am asking a business partner who trusts me, who trusts my judgment to stop whatever their plan is to implement something that I think is recommended for the company, I have to understand what I'm asking. I have to understand how long it'll take them to implement that. I have to understand the downstream impacts. I'll give you a prime example. If I ask them to create or help me create a data map or a data inventory, I didn't just say, hey, we need this in order to fulfill DSARs. What I say is, all these things are accurate. Yes, I need this for these reasons, but also look at it this way. You will now be able to see where we host information. It'll be easier for you when you go to create a bigger platform, a better platform, or when you go to talk to a consumer about X, Y, and Z. It's about trying to figure out, what does the business need? How are we continuing to grow as a business? And let me see how I can figure out how these compliance objectives that matter to me and my team, how can I make it matter to you as well? And I think sometimes if we're all talking above each other and we're just trying to keep it surface, we're not talking about what the underlying real issues are as to why there's an impediment to your request. But if I know you and you're comfortable with me, you might tell me, Lauren, I just got asked to do X, Y, and Z, and I don't have the bandwidth. What you're saying is important. I value what you're saying. How about 3 weeks instead of 1 week? Maybe they would have been afraid to ask me that before, but now I get what they're asking. I don't just say, I need this. I say, hey, by the way, this is the law. Here's why I'm asking you to do this. What do you think? How can you implement this? What are you thinking? I'm relying on their expertise too, not just me asking for a particular line item. I want them to use their creative juices as a coder, an engineer, a product person. You're the expert in your field. I'm telling you what needs to be done. What do you think is the best way to do that? I made them a colleague, if you will, so in a different space. They're coming back and they're saying, well, actually, Lauren, if you give me a couple more days, I can actually do this for you. I can build this out for you. And they always come up with better ideas than I had, honestly, to begin with. And sometimes they go into more privacy by design more than they would have if I just asked them to do X, Y, and Z.
We've talked about this before, that overlay of culture. And so taking the time to understand different perspectives, it takes a lot of extra skills to navigate that in an international or multinational organization.
Spot on. I worked for a company that hired a lot of people offshore. It took, it only takes you a little bit of time, but when you start realizing a pattern, I just ask questions like, hey, in your culture, what does this mean? Or, what do you mean by this? You just realize it's a different way of thinking. And a lot of times they're being even extra respectful. You just maybe not used to US culture per se. And it's the same lessons that you learn with your everyday colleagues. Maybe someone in Seattle thinks differently than someone in New York, or an engineer is going to think differently than a banker. It's just a matter of meeting someone where they are.
So this leads us to parting advice. Last words that you could share for someone who is either starting out or is been doing this for a long time and looking for a little word of encouragement, solidarity, that there's someone else out there going through what they're going through.
I think for me, it's just, don't be afraid to ask for what you want. That's something that took me a while to get there mentally, because you always extrapolate and you think to yourself, if I ask for this and you say no and this and that, you go through the negative chain more than the positive chain. I'll set it up for them in a way that makes it even maybe feel like their idea in a little way. But either way, I just feel like if you ask for what you want, at least that person knows, okay, here's your North Star. Here's where you're trying to get to. It does make my life a little bit easier, because now I may not have to do so many building blocks to get there. I just ask for it. The most they can say is no. And then we can have a conversation on to why you said no. But I'm just not afraid to ask anymore.
Lauren, thank you so much for doing this. We have now learned that we're going to ask for what we want. The worst that can happen is they will say no. I think the subtext there is don't take it personally. And we are going to raise our hands immediately, if tentatively.
I love that. Yes.
Thank you again. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Compliance Chronicles, where we look for guidance and inspiration from the personal journeys of compliance professionals.